"I want a child from you," the determined black woman declares to the shy farmer as dawn breaks across his struggling homestead, her words cutting through the Montana silence like a blade. The gentle farmer has endured years of mockery from townspeople who see only weakness in his quiet nature and kindness to wounded animals. They whisper he'll die alone on his failing land, forgotten and worthless. But the bold woman from the neighboring settlement has watched him closely, recognizing something precious that others cannot see. What she knows about his true inheritance could transform him from outcast to one of the territory's most powerful men. What he doesn't know about the deadly conspiracy surrounding his father's death could destroy them both before their unlikely partnership even begins. Can two souls dismissed by their worlds forge a bond strong enough to survive the truth that connects them? Or will the secrets buried in his bloodline kill them first? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. Samuel Carter crouched beside his injured calf, wrapping a torn cloth around its wounded leg with practiced gentleness. The morning sun cast long shadows across his modest Montana homestead, highlighting the patches in his worn jacket and the careful repairs that held his barn together. The sound of approaching hooves made him look up. A woman rode toward him with the confidence of someone who owned the world. Her dark skin gleamed in the early light, and her posture spoke of determination that Samuel had never possessed. She dismounted with fluid grace and walked directly to where he knelt. Her eyes studied him with an intensity that made his stomach flutter. "I want a child from you," she said. Samuel's hands froze on the bandage. The calf shifted beneath his touch, but he couldn't move. No woman had ever spoken to him so directly. Few women spoke to him at all. "I've been watching you for months," she continued. "The way you tend your animals, the way you work your land. You're different from other men." Heat crept up Samuel's neck. "I don't understand." "My name is Amara Daniels. I live in Freedman's Creek." She gestured toward the settlement visible in the distance. "My community needs children, good children raised by good people." Samuel finally stood, his legs unsteady. "Why me?" "Because you have something most men lack. Patience. Kindness." Her gaze didn't waver. "The qualities I want my child to inherit." Before Samuel could respond, she mounted her horse again. "Think about it, Mr. Carter. I'll return tomorrow for your answer." She rode away, leaving Samuel staring after her like a man struck by lightning. News traveled fast in Cedar Ridge. By afternoon, Mayor Harrison Webb stood in Samuel's doorway, his face twisted with disgust. "You've lost your mind if you think this town will stand for such an arrangement," Webb declared. "Bad enough you keep to yourself like some hermit. Now you're consorting with those people." Samuel's hands shook as he poured water for his chickens. "I haven't agreed to anything." "See that you don't." Webb stepped closer. "Men like you forget your place too easily. Remember what happened to your father when he got ideas above his station." The mayor left Samuel alone with memories he tried to forget. His father had been a dreamer too, always talking about justice and fairness, until sickness took him 3 years ago. Samuel had inherited nothing but debt and the mockery of neighbors who saw weakness where his father had seen virtue. The next morning brought rain and Amara's return. She waited under the overhang of his porch, water dripping from her coat. "Have you decided?" she asked. "The whole town knows," Samuel said. "They're angry." "Let them be angry." Amara stepped closer. "Are you?" Samuel studied her face. No woman had ever looked at him without pity or dismissal. Amara's eyes held something else entirely. Respect. "My people aren't pleased either," she continued. "My brother believes I've taken leave of my senses. But I know what I want, and I know what I've seen in you. What if you're wrong about me? I'm not." Her certainty unsettled him. "But there's something else you should know. Something about your father and the land he left you." Samuel frowned. "My father left me nothing but this small farm." Amara reached into her coat and withdrew a leather portfolio. "That's what they wanted you to believe. But your father was a careful man. He kept records, made copies." She handed him documents that felt foreign in his calloused hands. legal papers covered with stamps and signatures that made his head spin. "I don't understand," he said. "Your father owned more than this farm, Samuel. Much more." Amara's voice grew quiet. 2,000 acres of the best grazing land in the territory. Worth a fortune. The papers slipped from Samuel's fingers. "That's impossible. The town's elites stole it through fraudulent paperwork after your father's death. Mayor Webb, Banker Thomas, others." Amara gathered the scattered documents. "They counted on you being too meek to question their lies." Samuel's legs gave out. He sank onto his porch steps, rain spattering his face. "How do you know this?" "I have friends in the territorial capital, lawyers who believe in justice." She knelt beside him. "I didn't choose you out of desperation, Samuel. I chose you because you're about to become one of the most powerful landowners in Montana." The world tilted beneath him. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of humiliation suddenly took on new meaning. The gentle farmer they mocked was heir to an empire. "Why would you help me?" he whispered. "Because power in the hands of good people changes everything." Amara stood. "Think about what that could mean for both our communities." Rain fell harder, drumming against the roof. Samuel stared at the documents that promised to transform his life, knowing that accepting them would also make him enemies of the most dangerous men in the territory. Amara mounted her horse, but this time she didn't ride away immediately. "Tomorrow I'll bring a lawyer from the capital. Together we can reclaim what was stolen from you." She paused, rain streaming down her face. "The question is whether you're brave enough to take back what's rightfully yours." Thunder rolled across the plains as she disappeared into the storm, leaving Samuel clutching papers that could change everything, or get them both killed. The lawyer arrived with the morning sun, a sharp-eyed man named Patterson who spread documents across Samuel's kitchen table like a general planning battle. Amara sat beside Samuel, her presence steadying his trembling hands as they examined proof of his father's stolen legacy. "Your father was methodical," Patterson explained. "Every purchase, every transaction documented and filed with the territorial office. The fraud is undeniable." Samuel stared at a deed bearing his father's signature. 2,000 acres. Prime grazing land worth more than the entire town's annual revenue. Patterson's finger traced property lines on a hand-drawn map. "They killed your father's reputation first, then stole his land after his death." The words hit Samuel like physical blows. His father hadn't been a failure. The gentle man who taught him to tend injured animals with patience had been a successful businessman, destroyed by greed. "We file the papers today," Amara said, "before they realize what's happening." Samuel's hands shook as he signed legal documents that would transform him from outcast to landowner. Each signature felt like stepping off a cliff, but Amara's steady gaze gave him courage he'd never possessed. By noon, the entire town knew. Samuel walked down Main Street with Patterson and Amara flanking him, legal papers tucked safely in the lawyer's briefcase. Townspeople stared from doorways and windows, their expressions shifting from mockery to confusion to something approaching fear. Mayor Webb intercepted them outside the bank, his face flushed with rage. "This is a mistake, Carter. These documents won't hold up in court." "Actually, they will." Patterson's voice carried the authority of education and experience. "Your fraud was clumsy, Mayor. Easy to prove." Banker Thomas emerged from his establishment, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Samuel, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Your father was confused near the end. Sick. My father was murdered." The words left Samuel's mouth before he realized he'd spoken them. Silence fell over the street. Even Amara looked surprised. "That's a serious accusation," Webb said carefully. Samuel felt something shift inside him, a door opening that had been locked his entire life. Poisoned, most likely. Slow and careful so it looked like wasting sickness. Thomas stepped backward. "You can't prove such nonsense." "Maybe not yet." Samuel's voice grew stronger. "But I can prove you stole his land. Today." The confrontation drew a crowd. Shopkeepers and farmers gathered to witness Silent Sam challenging the men who ruled their town. Some faces showed support, others fear, but none showed the dismissive pity Samuel had endured his whole life. Patterson filed the papers at the courthouse while Samuel and Amara waited outside. Word spread through both communities like wildfire. By evening, representatives from Freedman's Creek arrived to assess this dramatic turn of events. Reverend Joshua Daniels, Amara's brother, stood tall and imposing in Samuel's doorway. His eyes held the weight of authority and protective fury. "My sister has lost her mind," he declared. "This arrangement was foolish when you were poor. Now it's dangerous." "The danger was always there," Amara replied calmly. "Now we have resources to fight back." "Resources bring enemies, powerful enemies." Joshua's gaze fixed on Samuel. "Are you prepared for what comes next?" Samuel thought of his father's patient hands teaching him to heal wounded animals, the same hands that had signed deeds for thousands of acres, the same hands that had shaken with sickness that might not have been sickness at all. "My father died for these principles," he said. "I won't dishonor his memory by running from them." Joshua studied him with new attention. "You're not the man I expected." "Neither was my father, apparently." Clara Jacobs arrived after dark, bringing news from town. The school teacher's usually cheerful face looked troubled as she joined them around Samuel's kitchen table. "The banker closed his office early," she reported. "Mayor Webb called an emergency meeting with the town council. They're planning something." "Let them plan." Amara's confidence remained unshaken. "Legal documents don't lie." "Legal documents can disappear," Clara warned. "Men like Webb don't accept defeat gracefully." Samuel felt the weight of his transformation settling over him. 24 hours ago, he'd been a forgotten farmer tending injured animals in solitude. Now he sat at the center of a conflict that would reshape two communities. "There's something else," Clara continued. "Strange men have been asking questions about you in town. Outsiders. They didn't give names." The room grew quiet. Samuel realized his newfound wealth came with dangers he'd never imagined. Men who had killed once wouldn't hesitate to kill again. "We need protection," Joshua said reluctantly. "Both communities are at risk now." Amara reached across the table and took Samuel's hand. Her touch sent warmth through his entire body, anchoring him to this new reality. "We have each other," she said simply. Samuel looked around the table at faces that had become allies in a single day. The determined woman who saw his worth, the protective brother learning to trust, the loyal friend risking her safety for justice. Outside, wind rattled his windows like restless spirits. His father's stolen empire waited to be reclaimed, but powerful enemies would fight to keep their ill-gotten gains. Samuel squeezed Amara's hand, feeling strength flow between them. Tomorrow would bring challenges that could destroy them both. But tonight they planned for a future that seemed impossible just hours before. The transformation was complete. Silent Sam had died with the sunrise. In his place sat a man ready to fight for everything his father had died protecting. Samuel's first legal victory came within a week. Judge Morrison ruled in his favor, returning 500 acres of prime pasture land that bore his father's original survey markers. The courthouse steps felt solid beneath Samuel's feet as he emerged with Amara at his side, both of them squinting against the afternoon sun. The town watched them differently now. Shopkeepers who had overcharged him for supplies suddenly offered credit. Children who once threw stones at his chickens now avoided his property entirely. Even his stuttering had faded, replaced by a steady voice that carried new authority. Amara moved her belongings to his farm that evening. She claimed the spare room his father had built for guests who never came, transforming the empty space into something that felt like home. Her presence filled the house with purpose and warmth. They worked side by side during the long summer days. Amara's business sense complemented Samuel's farming knowledge perfectly. She negotiated fair prices with livestock dealers, while he planned crop rotations that would maximize the reclaimed land's potential. Their partnership deepened beyond mere arrangement. Samuel found himself watching for Amara's approval, when he successfully bargained with a grain merchant. She sought his opinion on matters that had nothing to do with farming. They shared meals that stretched into evening conversations about dreams neither had dared voice alone. The retaliation began subtly. Samuel's well water turned bitter one morning, tasting of chemicals that made his livestock sick. Fence posts on his eastern boundary appeared, cut through with deliberate precision. Tools went missing from his barn, only to reappear bent and broken in his fields. Clara documented each incident with the methodical thoroughness of an educated woman building a legal case. She photographed damaged equipment and collected samples of contaminated water in glass jars that caught the light like evidence of evil. "They're testing your resolve," she warned during one of her evening visits, "seeing how much pressure you'll tolerate before backing down." Samuel examined a harness that had been sliced through with sharp blade. "They don't understand that I have nothing left to lose." "Actually, you have everything to lose now." Amara's voice carried weight that made him look up from the ruined leather. "That's what makes this dangerous." The danger became real on a moonless night in late August. Samuel woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of his animals crying in distress. Orange light flickered against his bedroom window, casting dancing shadows that spoke of disaster. His main barn blazed like a beacon against the darkness. Flames consumed years of stored hay and tools with hungry efficiency. Samuel ran toward the fire without thinking, but Amara caught his arm before he could rush into the inferno. "The animals!" he shouted over the roar of burning wood. "Already moved to safety." Her calm voice cut through his panic. "I saw men approaching hours ago." Got the livestock to the far pasture. They stood together watching his father's barn collapse in on itself, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky like angry stars. The message was clear: submit or face worse consequences. Samuel felt something harden inside him, a resolve his father had possessed but never taught him to recognize. He would not submit. The next morning brought visitors from both communities. Families from Freedman's Creek arrived with tools and lumber, ready to help rebuild what had been destroyed. Several farmers from Cedar Ridge joined them, men who had watched Samuel's transformation with growing respect. Mayor Webb appeared at midday with a delegation of town officials. Their faces carried forced sympathy that fooled no one. "Terrible accident," Webb declared, surveying the smoking ruins. "Old barns catch fire so easily. Perhaps you should consider selling before something worse happens." Samuel stood among the volunteers who had come to help him, drawing strength from their presence. The only accident was leaving evidence. He pointed to boot prints in the soft earth around the barn's foundation. Clara had already photographed them from multiple angles, her camera capturing details that would matter in court. "Careful accusations require careful proof," Webb replied, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. "We have proof." Amara stepped forward holding a metal container that reeked of kerosene. "Arson leaves traces, especially when the criminals are careless." The delegation retreated without another word, but their expressions promised escalation. Samuel watched them go, knowing that burning his barn had been a warning. Next time they might target something more precious. Construction began immediately. The community effort surprised Samuel with its efficiency and goodwill. Men from both settlements worked alongside each other, their previous tensions forgotten in the face of common purpose. Women brought food and water, creating an atmosphere that felt more like celebration than disaster recovery. Reverend Daniels arrived near sunset, his imposing figure surveying the progress with approval. "You've done something remarkable here," he told Samuel. "Brought people together who've spent years avoiding each other." Wasn't intentional. The best changes rarely are. Joshua's gaze settled on his sister, who was organizing tools with characteristic precision. Amara chose well. By week's end, the new barn stood larger and stronger than its predecessor. Samuel and Amara stood before the finished structure as workers packed their tools and headed home. The building represented more than mere storage. It symbolized community support and stubborn resilience in the face of intimidation. That night, Amara took Samuel's hand as they walked the perimeter of his property. Her touch had become familiar, but it still sent warmth through his entire body. "They'll try again," she said quietly. "Let them." Samuel's voice carried confidence that would have been impossible months earlier. "We're not the same people they tried to scare." Stars appeared overhead as they completed their circuit, two figures moving through darkness toward a future neither could have imagined alone. The wedding took place at dawn in Samuel's rebuilt barn, with representatives from both communities forming an unlikely congregation. Reverend Daniels performed the ceremony with solemn dignity, his deep voice carrying across the space where enemies had become allies. Amara wore her grandmother's dress, simple white cotton that transformed her into something luminous in the early light. Samuel spoke his vows without stuttering, his voice steady and sure. The transformation from outcast to confident landowner was complete, but traces of his gentle nature remained in the careful way he placed the ring on Amara's finger. Clara served as witness alongside Patterson the lawyer, both of them beaming with satisfaction at seeing justice rewarded with happiness. Even some of the townspeople who had initially opposed the union attended, drawn by curiosity that had evolved into grudging respect. The celebration was modest but warm. Tables made from sawhorses and planks groaned under dishes prepared by women from both settlements. Children who had never played together before chased each other between the adults, their laughter proof that barriers could dissolve when fear stepped aside. Mayor Webb's absence spoke louder than his presence would have. Banker Thomas remained notably missing as well, their hatred festering in private while the community moved forward without them. By autumn, Amara's pregnancy became visible. The news spread through both settlements like wildfire, cementing their union in a way that legal documents could not. Samuel found himself protective in ways he had never imagined, his eyes constantly scanning for threats that might endanger his growing family. The harassment continued, but changed tactics. Instead of obvious sabotage, their enemies employed subtle pressure. Suppliers from distant towns suddenly refused to honor contracts. Mail arrived opened and delayed. Strange men appeared at the edges of Samuel's property, watching from tree lines before disappearing into shadow. Clara documented these incidents with growing alarm. Her photographs now filled an entire file box, evidence of a campaign designed to appear coincidental while systematically destroying Samuel's newfound prosperity. "They're more careful now," she reported during one of her evening visits. "Harder to prove deliberate intent." Samuel studied the latest batch of photographs, images of trampled crops and broken fences that could be blamed on weather or wild animals. Someone's advising them, teaching them to be subtle, or someone's protecting you. Amara's observation made them both look up. Think about it. Every major attack has been interrupted or minimized. The barn fire could have spread to the house. The well poisoning should have killed the livestock. The idea of an unknown protector seemed impossible, but evidence supported Amara's theory. Samuel's property had suffered damage but avoided complete destruction, as if someone was limiting the escalation while gathering evidence of the crimes. The mystery deepened when Samuel discovered fresh horse tracks near his eastern boundary, prints that belonged to neither friend nor obvious enemy. The rider had positioned himself to observe the house while remaining hidden, returning night after night like a guardian spirit. Winter brought new challenges and unexpected revelations. Judge William Hartwell arrived on a bitter December morning, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in Samuel's kitchen. The distinguished man carried himself with authority that made even Reverend Daniels straighten with respect. "I've been watching this situation develop," Judge Hartwell announced without preamble. "Time has come to reveal my involvement." Samuel felt the blood drain from his face. Another powerful man with hidden agenda meant more complications in an already dangerous situation. "Your father was my business partner," the judge continued. "Silent partner in several ventures, including the land deals that made him wealthy. I was traveling when he died. Returned to find him dead and his assets stolen." The revelation hit Samuel like a physical blow. His father had been connected to one of the territory's most respected judges, a relationship that explained both his success and his murder. "You were the one watching my property," Samuel said, "protecting it while building a case against his killers." Judge Hartwell spread documents across the table with practiced efficiency. Your father's death wasn't random violence. It was calculated murder designed to steal his land and eliminate a witness to larger crimes. Amara leaned forward, her pregnant belly resting against the table edge. What crimes? Territorial land fraud involving dozens of families and thousands of acres. Your father discovered the scheme and threatened to expose it. The judge's eyes hardened. They killed him before he could testify. The scope of corruption exceeded anything Samuel had imagined. His personal struggle was merely one thread in a web of criminal conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. Mayor Webb and Banker Thomas are small players, Judge Hartwell continued. The real criminals operate from the capital, using local officials as tools to steal land and eliminate opposition. Clara's photographs suddenly took on new significance. Her careful documentation had captured evidence of crimes that extended far beyond Samuel's property, proof of a systematic campaign to terrorize honest landowners into surrender. "What happens now?" Samuel asked. "Now we spring the trap." The judge's smile held no warmth. "Your case provides the key to bringing down the entire operation. But first, we need to let them make one more mistake." Samuel felt history repeating itself, his family once again at the center of a battle between justice and corruption. The difference was that this time he had allies, resources, and the strength to fight back. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the landscape in white that would soon reveal the tracks of anyone foolish enough to approach his property. The final confrontation was coming, and Samuel intended to be ready. Judge Hartwell's trap required patience. Samuel watched from his kitchen window as federal marshals took positions in the tree line surrounding his property. Their presence remained invisible to casual observers, but Samuel knew armed law enforcement waited for Webb's final desperate move. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Word had been spread through carefully chosen channels that Samuel kept his most valuable documents in a safe hidden beneath his bedroom floorboards. The information was false, but Webb's desperation would make him believe it. "Tonight they'll come for what they think are the original land deeds," Judge Hartwell explained during their final planning meeting. "We'll have them for breaking and entering, assault, and attempted theft. More importantly, we'll have them alive to testify against their superiors." Amara's pregnancy had progressed enough to slow her movements, but her mind remained sharp as a blade. She sat beside Samuel at the kitchen table, her hand resting on her swollen belly while reviewing the marshal's deployment. "What if they don't take the bait?" she asked. "They will." The judge's confidence came from decades of experience with desperate criminals. Men like Webb would rather die than face bankruptcy and prison. They'll risk everything for one last chance to destroy the evidence. Samuel felt his father's presence strongly that evening, as if the murdered man's spirit had returned to witness justice finally served. The gentle farmer who had taught patience and kindness had also possessed the courage to challenge corruption, even unto death. Clara arrived after sunset with her camera equipment, determined to document whatever happened. Her photographs had become crucial evidence in the federal case, proof of systematic harassment that reached beyond local crimes into territorial corruption. "The marshals want you to act normally," she reported. "Light your usual lamps. Maintain your evening routines. Make the house appear vulnerable and undefended." Samuel extinguished all but 2 oil lamps, creating the illusion of a family preparing for sleep. He and Amara moved through their home with deliberate casualness, visible through windows to anyone watching from the darkness beyond. The attack came near midnight. Samuel heard the soft creak of footsteps on his front porch, followed by the gentle probing of lockpicks against his door. Webb had brought professionals, men skilled in quiet entry and quick violence. 4 figures slipped into his house like shadows given form. Samuel and Amara crouched behind their bedroom door, listening to whispered conversations and careful footsteps moving through rooms below. The intruders split up with military precision, searching for the hidden safe that existed only in rumors. Heavy boots climbed the stairs toward their bedroom. Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs as the doorknob turned slowly, revealing Mayor Webb's face twisted with hatred and desperate greed. "Where is it, Carter?" Webb's whisper carried more menace than any shout. "The safe, the documents." "What documents?" Samuel kept his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. Webb stepped into the room, followed by 3 armed men whose faces spoke of violence as casual as breathing. Banker Thomas brought up the rear, his soft features gleaming with sweat and fear. "Don't play games." Webb produced a knife that caught lamplight along its sharp edge. "Your father's original deeds. The evidence that could hang us all." The marshal's signal came as a whistle from outside, high and clear like a nightbird's call. Samuel threw himself over Amara as the windows exploded inward, federal agents pouring through openings with weapons drawn and voices shouting commands that shattered the midnight quiet. Webb's knife flashed toward Samuel's throat but never completed its arc. Marshal Davidson tackled the mayor with crushing force, driving him into the bedroom wall hard enough to crack the wooden planking. The blades skittered across floorboards as Webb crumpled unconscious. Thomas tried to flee but stumbled over his own feet in panic, falling face first into the hallway where another marshal waited with iron shackles. The banker's whimpering filled the house as federal justice closed around him like a trap. The professional criminals surrendered without resistance. Men experienced enough to recognize hopeless odds when surrounded by superior force. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands with the weary resignation of career outlaws finally caught. Judge Hartwell entered through the front door as marshals secured the prisoners. His presence transformed the chaotic scene into something resembling a courtroom, authority imposing order on violence through sheer force of will. "Gentlemen," he addressed the captured men with cold formality, "you're under federal arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and murder. Marshal Davidson will read the specific charges." Webb regained consciousness as the charges were recited, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally broken defeat. The mayor who had terrorized 2 communities now sat handcuffed on Samuel's bedroom floor, reduced to a common criminal awaiting justice. Samuel helped Amara to her feet, both of them shaken but unharmed. The federal marshals worked with quiet efficiency, documenting evidence and preparing prisoners for transport to the territorial capital. "It's over," Judge Hartwell announced as the last prisoner was loaded into a wagon. "The conspiracy dies with these arrests. Your father's murder is finally avenged." Dawn broke over Samuel's property as the marshal's convoy disappeared into the distance, carrying Webb and his accomplices toward trials that would expose decades of territorial corruption. Federal prosecutors waited in the Capitol with indictments that would reach the highest levels of government. Samuel and Amara stood on their front porch watching the sun rise on a world transformed. The gentle farmer who had been dismissed as weak had survived assassination attempts, arson, and home invasion. More importantly, he had preserved the legacy his father died protecting. Amara's hand found his as morning light painted their rebuilt barn golden. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had proven that justice delayed was not justice denied. 6 months after the arrests, Amara gave birth to their daughter during the first snowfall of winter. Samuel held the tiny girl in his calloused hands, marveling at how something so perfect could emerge from a world that had shown them such cruelty. Her eyes opened briefly, dark and alert like her mother's, before closing again in peaceful sleep. Clara served as midwife with competent efficiency, her teacher's training extending to medical knowledge that proved invaluable in the isolated farmhouse. She cleaned the baby with gentle hands while Amara rested, exhausted but radiant with the satisfaction of bringing new life into existence. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered, wrapping the infant in blankets sewn by women from both communities. "What will you name her?" Samuel looked at Amara, who smiled despite her fatigue. They had discussed names for months, but the decision felt momentous now that their daughter lay breathing in his arms. "Hope," Amara said simply. "Her name is Hope." The trials in the territorial capital had concluded with convictions that sent shockwaves through Montana's political establishment. Webb received 20 years in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud. Thomas got 15 years as an accomplice. The professional criminals who had invaded Samuel's home faced shorter sentences in exchange for testimony that exposed corruption reaching into the governor's office. More importantly, dozens of families received compensation for stolen land. Samuel's legal victory had become a template for justice that restored thousands of acres to their rightful owners. Entire communities benefited from the precedent his case established. Judge Hartwell visited regularly, having developed genuine affection for the family his investigation had protected. He brought news from the capital and gifts for baby Hope, treating Samuel like the son he had never had. "Your father would be proud," he told Samuel during one autumn visit. His death wasn't meaningless. It planted seeds that grew into justice for countless families. Samuel's transformation into a respected landowner continued evolving. He used his wealth not for personal luxury, but for community improvement. The farming cooperative he established brought together families from both Cedar Ridge and Freedman's Creek, proving that racial divisions could dissolve when replaced with shared purpose. The cooperative's success attracted attention from across the territory. Newspaper reporters traveled from Helena and Billings to document the experiment in integrated agriculture. Their articles portrayed Samuel as a visionary leader who had bridged divides through practical cooperation rather than political rhetoric. Clara married Judge Hartwell in a ceremony that further symbolized the community's transformation. Their wedding brought together the same people who had attended Samuel and Amara's union, but the atmosphere felt different now. Hope replaced fear. Trust replaced suspicion. Samuel gave the bride away in place of her deceased father, walking Clara down an aisle formed by friends from both settlements. The honor moved him deeply, recognition that his status had evolved from outcast to beloved community leader. Reverend Daniels performed the ceremony with obvious pleasure, his initial opposition to his sister's choices now transformed into grateful acknowledgement of her wisdom. Joshua had learned that love could not be controlled or directed, only blessed when it appeared in unexpected forms. Winter brought challenges that tested the cooperative's resilience. Harsh weather destroyed crops and killed livestock across the territory, but the integrated community survived through mutual support that would have been impossible under the old divisions. Families shared resources without regard to race or previous allegiances. Samuel's leadership proved crucial during the crisis, his gentle nature providing stability, while his business acumen ensured fair distribution of limited supplies. Spring arrived with news that changed everything again. The territorial legislature had passed laws based on Samuel's case, providing legal protections for small farmers and establishing penalties for land fraud that would prevent future corruption. Samuel stood in his fields watching new crops emerge from soil that had been stolen from his father and reclaimed through courage he had never known he possessed. Hope played at his feet, now old enough to walk, but still small enough to see the world as a place of infinite possibility. Amara joined them, carrying a letter that had arrived with the morning post. Her smile suggested good news, but she waited until Hope was distracted by a butterfly before speaking. "The governor wants to appoint you to the Territorial Land Commission," she announced. "Official recognition of your expertise and integrity." Samuel considered the offer while watching his daughter chase shadows across the ground his father had died defending. Public service would mean travel and responsibility beyond his comfortable routine, but it also meant protecting other families from the corruption that had nearly destroyed his own. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think your father would want you to accept." Amara's hand found his, as it had during their first conversation about impossible dreams. "I think you were meant for more than farming." That evening, Samuel sat on his front porch writing his acceptance letter while Hope slept in Amara's arms. The words came easily now, confidence replacing the stammering uncertainty that had once defined him. Clara and Judge Hartwell arrived to share supper and discuss the appointment's implications. Their presence filled the house with warmth and laughter, proof that families could be chosen as well as born. As darkness fell over the Montana plains, Samuel reflected on the journey that had transformed him from Silent Sam into a man whose voice carried across the territory. The shy farmer who had once hidden from the world now stood ready to help shape its future. Hope stirred in her mother's arms, opening dark eyes that held all the promise her name suggested. Samuel touched her tiny hand, feeling the weight of responsibility, and the lightness of love in equal measure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight he was content to sit with his family in the house his father had built, on land that was finally, truly, eternally theirs.